50,000 years ago, on a riverbank somewhere in what's now Europe, two groups catch sight of each other across the water. Same fire-building skill, same sharpened spears, same rough size, and yet two different species of human staring at each other, both very much alive. Here's the part that should stop you. Right now, today, there's exactly one kind of human left on this entire planet. For most of the time humans have existed, that was never true. This isn't a story about how you got here in a straight line. It's a story about how you ended up being the only one left in a room that used to be a lot more crowded. But to explain that, we have to go back. Not thousands of years, billions. So let's move through the early part fast, because you've probably heard some version of it already, and because the genuinely strange part of this story hasn't started yet. 3.8 billion years ago, a molecule figures out how to copy itself and wraps a membrane around the trick to keep it from washing away. Call it LUCA, the ancestor of literally everything alive, you included. 2 billion years of not much happens after that, just cells dividing. Then one cell swallows another, and instead of eating it, keeps it running as an internal engine. That partnership is still inside every one of your cells today, and it's the reason complex life became possible at all. Cells start sticking together instead of drifting apart. 500 million years later, something in the fossil record explodes, the Cambrian, when body shapes diversify faster than at almost any other point in Earth's history. In the middle of that mess swims a nothing little creature called Pikaia, notable for exactly one feature, a stiff rod running down its back. That rod becomes your spine. Everything after this point, fish, jaws, forelegs, walking onto land, eggs that don't need water, a skull with a hole for a stronger jaw muscle, all of it is you being assembled, one spare part at a time, over hundreds of millions of years. Then, 252 million years ago, something almost erases the whole project. A mass extinction that kills off roughly 9 out of every 10 species alive. Your ancestors are among the survivors, small and forgettable. For the next 150 million years, they stay that way, on purpose. Tiny, nocturnal, staying out of the way of something much bigger. Dinosaurs run the planet. Then an asteroid ends that arrangement in an afternoon, and the small mammals that spent 150 million years hiding suddenly have nowhere left to hide from, and nothing left in charge. This is where the story stops being generic. Somewhere in the scramble that follows, one very small, unremarkable mammal called Purgatorius moves into the trees. It's nothing special to look at, squirrel-sized, eating fruit and bugs, except for one thing. Its hands can actually grip a branch on purpose, using flat nails instead of claws. Grabbing something deliberately turns out to be one of the more important skills in this entire story. Eyes drift toward the front of primate faces over the next tens of millions of years, trading a wide field of view for depth perception. Useful when a wrong guess about the distance to the next branch is fatal. Around 25 million years ago, some of these tree-dwelling primates lose their tails entirely and start swinging arm over arm instead of running along the tops of branches. These are the first apes. Then, somewhere between 6 and 7 million years ago, one ape population splits off from the rest in ways nobody living at the time could possibly have noticed. This is where your specific story actually starts. The oldest known member of this new branch, Sahelanthropus, still has a brain roughly the size of a chimpanzee's, but paleontologists found something telling in its skull. The opening where the spinal cord connects sits underneath the head, not toward the back. That's a walking posture, not a knuckle-walking one. Standing up came millions of years before big brains did, and honestly, nobody fully agrees on why. Free hands, better temperature regulation, a clearer view over tall grass, possibly all three, possibly none. That's species number 2, by the way, if you're counting. The ancestors of chimps on one branch, the earliest hominins on the other, coexisting on the same landscape. By 3.8 2.2 million years ago, Australopithecus afarensis, the species that gave us a partial skeleton nicknamed Lucy, is walking upright on a routine basis, though her arms are still long and her fingers still curved for climbing, and her brain is only about a third the size of yours. Then, 2.6 million years ago, something new turns up alongside hominin fossils, rocks that have been deliberately struck against other rocks to produce a sharp edge. Homo habilis, handyman, is the species this gets pinned on, and it's the first clear sign that a member of your family tree was reshaping its surroundings on purpose instead of just surviving in them. By 1.9 million years ago, Homo erectus shows up, taller, bigger-brained, built for covering long distances on foot. Homo erectus is the first hominin confirmed to control fire and the first to leave Africa entirely, walking as far as the Caucasus and eventually Southeast Asia. Cooking makes calories easier to extract from food, which may be part of why brains kept growing from here. Now the family tree gets genuinely crowded. Homo heidelbergensis shows up around 700,000 years ago and eventually splits into at least two lineages. One becomes the Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, and one becomes us, evolving separately in Africa. Neanderthals are not a rough draft. They have brains as large as ours. They control fire. They bury their dead with apparent ceremony, and their toolkits are every bit as sophisticated as anything being made in Africa at the same time. Around 300,000 years ago, fossils at a site called Jebel Irhoud in Morocco show the earliest known Homo sapiens, us, already with a face that would look basically normal on a modern street, sitting on top of a skull shape that hadn't quite finished changing yet, which brings the count to at least 4. Homo sapiens in Africa, Neanderthals across Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans somewhere across Asia known mostly from a handful of teeth and finger bones, and at least 1 or 2 other hominin lineages still being sorted out by paleontologists as this video is being made. 4 or 5 different kinds of human walking around the same planet at the same time, none of them knowing they were living through something that would later look impossibly strange in hindsight. Around 70,000 years ago, groups of Homo sapiens start moving out of Africa in large, sustained numbers, and on the way, they run into the others. They interbreed. If your ancestry traces outside Africa, a small but measurable percentage of your DNA right now is Neanderthal, and some of those genes are still doing work in your immune system today. You are, quite literally, carrying pieces of a species that no longer exists. And then, one by one, the others disappear. Neanderthals are gone by around 40,000 years ago. Denisovans fade out not long after. The other lineages go quiet in the fossil record. Nobody knows exactly why, and it's very likely there isn't one single reason. Climate shifts, competition for the same resources, small population sizes, maybe direct conflict in places, maybe simple bad luck compounding over thousands of years. What's certain is the outcome. A planet that had several kinds of human on it for hundreds of thousands of years narrows down to just one. Around the same stretch of time, something else shows up in caves. Painted animals on rock walls, deliberately carved figurines, shell jewelry, burials with grave goods. Not a sudden switch flipping on, but a slow accumulation of shared imagination, passed down and refined generation after generation. And around 10,000 years ago, in several places around the world independently, that one remaining species starts planting instead of only gathering. Grain gets stored, settlements stop moving, villages become towns, towns become cities, and a change in how one species gets its calories eventually produces writing, law, and, several thousand years later, someone sitting exactly where you're sitting now, watching a video about how any of this happened. So here's the part worth sitting with. You didn't arrive at the end of a straight line stretching back through history, each version slightly better than the last, right up to you. For most of the time your kind of animal has existed, there were several of you, different, coexisting, sometimes meeting on riverbanks, sometimes interbreeding, sometimes competing for the same valley. You're not the finished product of a ladder. You're the one who happened to still be standing when the room emptied out.